A grisly crime scene is discovered in an abandoned trailer in small-town Texas.
You're immediately hit with a foul odor.
I saw a deceased male with his head and torso inside of a large green trash can.
It looked like someone had tried to possibly dispose of the body, but gave up.
The victim is a husband and father of 3. And with the rest of the family nowhere to be found, concerns grow.
There were toys, children's clothes thrown about everywhere. Somebody had left in a hurry. Where's the wife and where are the 3 children?
They were entered into TCIC as missing endangered people. We don't know if this is potential burglary or robbery.
What unfolds is a homicide investigation with 5 potential victims. But when detectives track down their killer, they find the truth is more disturbing than anything they could have imagined.
She wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth.
She was purchasing items to cover up this crime, all while she had her child in tow.
She's a monster.
You might as well arrest me now, because I'm number 1 on the list.
It's the kind of case that causes you to lose sleep at night.
December 4th, 2012. It's a chilly winter day in Red Oak, Texas, when police receive a frantic emergency call. 54-year-old Susanna Asbell says she's outside her son's home with her husband Terry, and they think something terrible has happened.
They were concerned because they had not heard from their son, Marlon Wade Reese, or the daughter-in-law, Amy Reese, in 3 to 4 weeks.
On the 13th or 14th of October, I had this really bad nightmare. Like something had just was crushing my heart. I just knew it was Wade. My husband asked me what was wrong, and I said, it was a bad feeling. Wade was fixing to start a new job in Waxahachie, and I knew the job, they work people like, sometimes they work them 80, 90 hours a week. I thought, we know he's busy, he started his new job, I wasn't no concern or anything.
Susanna says when Thanksgiving came and went without any word from Wade or his wife Amy, she decided it was time to pay them a visit.
On December 4th, I looked at my husband, I said, I don't care what we're doing, we're getting in the vehicle and we're going to Red Oak. As soon as I drove up, I knew something was wrong. Wade's vehicle was parked backwards and it was just full of dirt, like it had not been moved. When I opened the mailbox, it just was bloated with mail. Terry says, well, let me go in the house and see what I can see. He said, you go ask the neighbors if they've seen anything. Got to the neighbor and I said, have you seen Wade or Amy? Have you seen anybody? And they said, no, we hadn't seen them in a while. And then he says, but we have been smelling something from coming that way. And about that time, I heard my husband holler. He said, what's the address here? And I gave him the address. And he says, just, you can't go in there. There's somebody dead in there. And I looked at him and I said, I know it's Wade.
Deputies and investigators quickly arrive and tell Susanna and Terry to wait outside while they search the home.
We entered the residence, which was a mobile home. You're immediately hit with a foul odor consistent with decomposition.
I could immediately see that someone had attempted to pack up the house. There was a TV missing from the wall where it had clearly been on an entertainment center.
There were toys, children's clothes, books, DVDs. It was definitely in disarray. Stuff thrown about everywhere. Somebody had left in a hurry.
In the primary bedroom, they find the source of the smell.
I saw a deceased male lying face down with his head and torso inside of a large green trash can. His feet were out of the trash can and coming through the doorway.
The feet are bound, the hands have been tied, there's a bag over its head. I've worked multiple homicides before this one, but this one was unique. It was shocking. It was apparent that their actions were to get the body completely in the trash can, like they were going to take the trash out.
He had skin slippage and marbling of his skin, which implied that he had been there for quite some time.
We're having multiple discussions about what could have happened, what went on. Is this Wade? Where's the wife? Has he been killed and they've been taken and now we have an abducted wife and abducted children? I want to start talking to people, witnesses, and trying to put the puzzle together.
The Red Oak police showed up and they taped it off, and I just knew it was Wade. I just knew in my heart it was him.
Marlon Wade Reese was born January 5th, 1976 in Las Cruces, New Mexico. He grew up in Northeast Texas, raised by his mother, Susanna.
We're like third and fourth generation Texans, so I love Texas. When we moved to Red Oak, we bought a piece of land and we bought a trailer. Wade was a really good little baby. When he started walking, that's when the fun really started, because he was getting into everything, bringing bugs in his pocket and trying to jump off of stuff, and he just thought he was a tough little guy.
Though his parents split up when he was 6 months old, Wade remained very close with his father.
We were too young. It just wasn't going to stay, and we decided to separate ways. But I had a very good relationship with Wade's father. From the age of 5, Wade used to spend the whole summer with his grandpa and his dad, and he would ride motorcycles like crazy. And as he grew and got bigger, his grandpa would buy Wade whatever he wanted. I got married again, and then I found out I was pregnant with Crystal, and Wade wasn't very excited about having another person, because he'd been almost 6 years, it was just, him and I.
My brother was a very good brother. He definitely protected me, and especially when I got older, there's a lot of boyfriends that he did not like, but growing up, man, we had lots of fun.
After dropping out of high school, Wade followed in his grandfather's footsteps by pursuing a passion for mechanics.
Wade was good at taking cars apart, motorcycles, and he would build things. And he always had a job.
He had quite a few girlfriends. My brother was a worker. It was, let's get my stuff together so that I can go be a man.
He was looking for that right woman. Told him, I said, you may have to kiss a lot of frogs out there till you get that princess.
At the age of 32, Wade finally met his match on a dating website. A 33-year-old single mother named Amy Deaver.
Wade said he just met this nice lady in Fort Worth, and he'd been talking to her, and he just thought she was really cute. She had 2 children. Wade was really protective of them. They got along really well. They were very loving. They was always holding hands and kissing on the couch.
In 2008, Wade and Amy got married.
Wade was just ready to settle down. Wade thought he found the one,
Wade called me and said, Mom, can you take Amy and buy her a dress? And I said, sure, I'll buy her a dress. So I took her, we went to Walmart, she picked out a really nice dress.
Not long after that, Wade had another wish fulfilled when Amy gave birth to their son.
Wade was very ecstatic. Wade knew, well, I got a motorcycle partner now. I've got somebody that can teach how to work on cars.
I really honestly feel like my whole brother's demeanor in life, went up a level. You know what I mean? Okay, this is it. I got my family. I got my son.
I was living in North Dallas, and I talked to my husband, and I said, the trailer house is empty. I'm just going to give it to Wade. Amy was very grateful. He was so happy.
I've never seen them argue, never, not once. Amy and Wade were just Amy and Wade.
But their happy home has become the scene of a grisly murder. And investigators are trying to determine what happened.
We don't know if this is a potential burglary or robbery or something that just went bad.
I immediately spoke with Terry and Susanna Asbill, and I learned that Amy was missing, the 3 children were missing, her van was missing along with their dogs.
You could hear jibber jabber from the police saying whoever was in there was something on top, and I thought, oh Lord, I thought they were going to find my grandson dead also.
Coming up, the crime scene provides several clues about the killer.
To abuse a body like that just shows an enormous lack of respect for human life.
And the autopsy reveals startling details.
The person stood up outside the bed in a downward manner, shooting while he was asleep.
Before the search for Amy and the children takes an unexpected turn.
The story just kept getting worse.
An unidentified body suspected to be Wade Reese has just been discovered decomposing in his family's mobile home. After securing the crime scene, Red Oak sheriffs put out an alert for Amy Reese and the children.
In the event that anybody were to come in contact with law enforcement, we would be notified. And they were entered into TCIC, NCIC as missing endangered people.
Homicide detectives then take over, scouring the trailer for any clues.
We were collecting blood, articles of evidence that we could use to compare with DNA that potentially could be left at the scene by the suspect.
His head was wrapped in a trash bag. He was bound using duct tape and rope by the legs. I felt like that the trash bag is probably concealing a manner of injury of some type.
I got the impression this was likely a gunshot wound, and the trash bag had been tied over the victim's head to contain the fluids that were actively coming out of his head.
I noted some blood splatter on the bed. I noted a void in the mattress. I ended up cutting that void open where I recovered a projectile that was a bullet.
Investigators aren't able to locate a murder weapon, but they do find empty shell casings, as well as evidence of a hasty cleanup.
There was smeared blood on the trash can and a dolly with blood smeared on it as well.
It looked like someone had tried to possibly dispose of the body, but gave up in the middle and just left.
He was a very tall man, and bodies are not easily movable. That's the reason they use the phrase dead weight.
To abuse a body like that, it just shows an enormous lack of concern or respect for human life.
We couldn't readily identify the body at the scene because of the advanced stages of decomposition.
Outside the home, investigators find another trash can by the curb.
Inside the trash can, we found several plastic or rubber gloves. We found the boxes for borax laundry detergent and carpet deodorizer. I was able to develop fingerprints on the packaging for a 3M respirator mask, which would have been used to block out any sort of decomposition odor. And I was able to find a fingerprint on a box of contractor trash bags.
Several of the gloves that were found, the duct tape, the mask, those items were submitted for DNA analysis.
It was a lucky break that the trash can had not been picked up and all of those items disposed of at that point, because 2 months had gone by.
The crime scene tells detectives this was no simple robbery attempt.
Somebody was trying to mask a scene, and it was apparent by what I was looking at when I was walking around the crime scene that it was quick. It was not well thought out.
When we went into some of the children's bedrooms, we could see that the closets had been cleared out. I saw several suitcases around the house that appeared to be partially packed up and left behind.
It wasn't a situation where somebody was looking to find something. Somebody was leaving in a hurry.
I'm working something like this and I find out there's children. My focus always is, where are the children? What's going on with the children?
Desperate for answers, investigators pull Amy and Wade's bank records.
We investigated the couple's finances and found pattern to a local storage facility in a nearby city. It was in Duncanville, Texas.
We executed a search warrant there, and we found several items of interest inside the storage unit. We found several trash bags that contained bedding that had been stripped from the bed at the house. We found several articles of clothing that had apparent blood on them. We found several firearms and things of that nature. One of the articles of clothing was a pair of camouflage cargo shorts that had blood stains on both sides and within the waistband of the shorts. We were actually shocked that these trash bags were in this storage unit. We did not think it was going to be that easy.
The shorts that were found could have been worn by a male or a female.
We believe that one of the pairs of shorts that we found in the trash bags belonged to our victim.
Detectives send the bloody pants out for testing. But they leave with more than just another piece of forensic evidence.
When we executed that search warrant and met with the storage facility personnel, we learned that Amy had come to the storage facility with the children. They didn't know what Amy was doing, but they watched the children while Amy was in and out of her storage building. Once we were able to put eyes on Amy and the children, we no longer believed that Amy had been abducted.
"24 hours into the investigation of the Reese family's disappearance, after speaking to an employee at their storage unit, police have just discovered that Amy and the children are alive. While detectives are working to track them down, they receive the autopsy report.
The doctor who performed the autopsy told us that because of the advanced stages of decomposition, they were going to have to take extra steps to identify them. Mrs. Asbill had relayed that Wade had a tattoo of a Texas Longhorn tattoo on his arm, I believe, and then a Yosemite Sam cartoon character on his chest. Later at the medical examiner's office, the doctor did note tattoos consistent with the description on the body.
Once we were able to get the identification of the decedent, Wade Reese, we continued our process of trying to figure out what happened. My focus immediately was, where's the wife and where are the 3 children? The pathologist made the determination that Wade had been shot on the right side of the head, and that would have been the entry wound, and that the exit wound was right above the left ear. And he would have died instantly. With Wade laying on his side, we concluded that the person stood up outside the bed in a downward manner, shooting Wade while he was turned away from them, asleep.
The medical examiner also notes burns likely caused by sulfuric acid.
It had been thrown on Wade's face. Whoever did this thought they could take that chemical, and I feel like they were trying to dissolve the body get rid of the body by the chemical eating away at the flesh.
The blood on the shorts found in the Reese's storage unit is confirmed to be Wade's. This, combined with the sighting of Amy and the children, causes detectives to consider Amy a suspect. They talk to Wade's loved ones to see if there's a motive.
Detective Fitzgerald called me, and he said, I'm coming to your house to talk to you. By that time, I'd already cried for 2 days straight. He showed up, and he confirmed it was Wade. I don't think I even cried, to be honest with you. And he said, you don't know any places that they would go. And the only thing I just knew was that Amy's mother lived down in Temple, Texas. She didn't have a very good relationship with her mother, but she still tried to go see her mother because Amy had a little sister.
Amy grew up in South Texas. She grew up in the foster care system. She was a habitual runaway, living with grandparents throughout her childhood. She had been in and out of different group homes.
Amy started at a young age getting in relationships with men.
I want to say the gentleman was probably 20, maybe 25 years older than her.
She had her first child together with this man. This man ultimately was arrested and convicted of sexual assault of a different child.
She directly went to a second relationship, didn't get married, but had another child.
According to Wade's family, he did his best to help Amy and her daughters heal from their traumatic experience.
Amy, she needed somebody that she could rely on, somebody that would nurture her. She didn't have that. She only had one of the little girls half the time. One of the girls went to her grandmother's on the weekend. He wanted to make sure that they knew that they could come to him and they didn't have to worry about anything happening to them. That he was like a safe place.
As far as Wade's mother is concerned, Amy had no reason at all to kill him. But Wade's sister recalls an incident that occurred several months before his death.
Wade and Amy got into a fight one night. Wade went outside and slept in his car in the yard that we had. Well, apparently Amy's daughter called the cops and it's like, my parents are fighting. And the cops showed up and drugged my brother out of his truck while he was asleep and arrested him.
We were able to determine that Amy had also been arrested for assaulting Wade.
We learned that the children had been removed from the home in 2009. But we also learned that they had worked those services and that the children were allowed to be reunited with Amy and Wade.
We were highly concerned for the children initially because we didn't know her status. We didn't know whether or not Miss Reese was involved.
All of the evidence, both circumstantial and physical, pointed towards Amy. It was just a matter of putting it all together.
Coming up, the search for Amy heats up.
Knowing that 2 months had gone by at this point, she could have been anywhere.
And when detectives find her, she makes a startling accusation.
It was abusive for my daughters. It was getting physical and inappropriate.
So she's levying these accusations against Wade, when in fact, Child Protective Services took the children due to Amy, not her husband.
Days into the search, the unidentified body is now known to be Wade Reese. With the positive ID, detectives are even more intent on finding his wife and 3 children.
There was a teenage daughter and 2 littles. I knew that they had been enrolled in the local Red Oak Independent School District. I was able to talk to administrators and get some key information about the children being unenrolled. It was noted that there was a family emergency.
Records indicate Amy pulled the children out of school on October 15th.
At the scene, when we were going through the mail, it was dated the 16th of October. So the murder occurred right around the time that Amy took the kids out of school. I knew that our target was focusing on Amy.
Knowing that 2 months had gone by at this point, she could have been anywhere in the country or in the world.
Calls to Amy's cell phone are going straight to voicemail, and GPS data has been turned off. So police track her using a more antiquated method, the DMV.
I had our dispatch center start running Amy's name throughout all 50 states, and they were able to get a hit of a Colorado driver's license.
When we found out that Amy was in Colorado, it told us a couple of things. It told us, one, she was okay. We didn't have any reason to believe that she fell victim to anybody. Two, we got pretty excited because we had a general area where we could look for her. We had found the address on her driver's license, and we reached out to the Denver Police Department, requested their assistance.
Denver police locate the children through enrollment information.
We learned that the children were okay. One child had been left with a family member. The other 2 children, we discovered they were okay. Denver police moved into their procedures and got their local child protective services involved.
When Denver police report to the address listed, they are met by the residents who tell them Amy is not there.
We found out Amy had befriended and was living with the owner, and that owner was able to help her out to watch her kids while she went and looked for a job.
Police convinced the resident to call Amy and falsely tell her that the littlest child is out in the street and they need her to come home.
When Amy responds to the emergency call, she's taken into police custody.
Detective Castro is a part of Denver Police Homicide. He was asked to come in and help, and he met with Amy at headquarters.
My first priority is to, see if I could build a rapport with her. Amy was very responsive to my questions. She was cooperative. She didn't seem like the typical homicide suspect. What I learned from Amy during our interview was that she left Texas to get away from her husband.
Okay, why don't you tell me about that?
He was abusive.
What do you mean he's being abusive?
Emotional, verbal, and for the kids, for my daughters, it was getting physical and inappropriate.
They'd had previous fights where they were both arrested. She basically says that, the final straw on this was when Wade picked up her daughter and slammed her on the floor. She knew she had to get out of this relationship for her kids. She said they left on October 14th in the middle of the night. She took their white van.
That's the last time you saw him?
That was the last time I saw him. My daughters and my son, we snuck out of the house, got what we could get, and snuck out.
She said that she returned the next day. She drove around the property a couple times, hoping that he wasn't there. She had to sneak into the house to get their belongings, and then she left. She traveled through Oklahoma, Kansas, and eventually settled here in Denver because she said she liked the area. She wanted to get a job, and she thought that she could come here and basically start a new life. Eventually, we come to a point where I had to ask her if she knew what happened to her husband, and she claimed that she didn't. Just told her, I was just on the phone with Ellis County Sheriff's, and he's dead.
He was murdered.
Murdered?
Mm-hmm. Here you are, you're an abused wife. He's being mean to your kids, and you pick up and leave town. I think you did what you had to do to protect your kids. But did you have to do more?
No, I left. When he was sleeping, I left.
I tried to sympathize with her. You know, there's a lot of women in your situation. I think people would understand. I'm trying to draw this out of her, try to get her to explain, you know, why she did this.
To investigators, Amy's response is telling.
I want to go down for this regardless, don't matter. You might as well arrest me now, because I'm number one on the list.
Amy Reese's interview with Denver police raises further suspicions, but she ends it before they can probe any further about Wade's murder.
It doesn't matter even if I have an attorney. I'm going to go down for this regardless if I did it or not. Life is over.
She ultimately requested an attorney to represent her, and she stopped the interview.
Obviously, we didn't get a confession where she said that she murdered Wade, but I think we narrowed down dates. I thought it was strange that, you know, she left on October 14th and then she had to sneak into the house on the 15th. As an investigator, you know, when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking he's already dead at this point, and she's driving around the property making sure nobody's a witness there.
She told Detective Castro that she had gone back into the house and collected belongings. So she was implicating herself in the crime scene.
Amy is released for the time being, but Denver police keep her under surveillance while detectives continue their investigation, as well as request that she submit her electronic devices for review. When they ask Wade's family about the allegations of abuse, they vehemently deny them.
There was absolutely no proof that Wade had ever harmed any of those children. There was no indication that Wade had been anything other than a loving father.
I'd never seen him yell or get angry. 110% I knew my son would never do anything like that, never.
So she's levying these accusations against Wade when, in fact, Child Protective Services took the children from the home, and that was due to abuse and neglect by Amy, not her husband.
Investigators obtain a search warrant for Amy's electronic devices, and what they find suggests her reasons for leaving had nothing to do with the children.
When we had forensics go through her computers and phones, we found that she lived a life of deviant sexual acts.
Within days of Wade being dead, she was already on sexually explicit websites and chat rooms. She was sexting with men, you know, sending them graphic photos of herself as if she knew that he was dead. So perhaps Amy was having an affair.
She was tired of Wade. She was ready to start a new life with somebody else. It was apparent with her deviant sexual texting that was going on.
It showed that Amy had no remorse, that she was able to leave her husband rotting in that trailer for 2 months, acting as if nothing was wrong.
But as suspicious as Amy's exploits might be, what detectives need is evidence tying her to the murder.
We discovered they were on government assistance, and that led us to Amy's WIC card. And when we ran a history on that, that's when we started to tie purchases that she had made.
Through looking at Amy's financials, we were able to locate receipts that indicated she had made purchases both at a Walmart local in Red Oak and then again at a nearby town of Waxahachie.
Investigators compare Amy's purchases to the cleaning supplies found in the Reese's garbage.
I met with the loss prevention folks at Walmart, and we immediately started running some of the barcodes that we had found at the scene. We were able to hone in to the surveillance of when those articles were purchased. We discovered that Amy was on camera. She had her daughter with her. And she's smart, halfway. She goes to the ATM, pulls cash out, and pays for it with cash. Some of the stuff in Red Oak she purchased with her WIC card.
Amy was purchasing items that she was using to cover up this crime, all while she had her child in tow.
When we discovered that she was on video with the trash can, we knew we had her.
Detectives get further confirmation when lab results come back on the fingerprints and DNA they collected.
We discovered Wade's blood along with Amy's fingerprint in a trash bag that contained Wade's blood, which is a direct link to the crime scene.
The latent fingerprints that were found that were confirmed to be Amy's, in addition to the absence of anybody else's prints or physical evidence, led us to get the arrest warrant on Amy.
Investigators are confident that Amy pulled the trigger. Now, prosecutors must convince a jury this mom turned murderer.
Regards to her childhood and how she came up, I don't know how it relates to why she did what she did. I felt that there was obvious tension in the house. For whatever reason, Amy was feeling pressure to get out of this relationship.
I think she was ready to move on to another man. She was tired of Wade and ready to move on. So she killed him. At this point, we are tying up loose ends, making sure we have all our evidence processed. That way the prosecutors have the best case that we can put together to bring justice to Wade's parents and family.
On January 20th, 2013, Amy Reese is extradited from Colorado to Texas, where she is charged with the murder of her husband, Wade Reese.
I stayed in contact with the family of Wade throughout this entire process. They were asking the same questions that we had. Why? Why did she do this? Why could something happen like this to their son?
The evidence we had against Amy was several DNA profiles. We had latent fingerprints. We had her on video purchasing the items that were used in her attempts to conceal or clean up the crime scene.
When her trial begins in April, Amy makes a surprising announcement.
Amy and her lawyer decided she would plead guilty. So the trial was to determine punishment.
I think she knew that the evidence was stacked up against her.
Rather than contesting the details of the murder, the defense makes an appeal to the jury for leniency.
What her attorney tried to do was show that Amy had a very difficult upbringing. When Amy was on the stand, she says that at about age 11, she began to be sexually abused. She was abused by her own father.
I think Amy was trying to put that out there to justify why she killed Wade. She said that he was molesting their children, and she discovered that, and so she killed him to protect her children. We had local advocacy centers in Denver forensically check the children, and we found no evidence to support that theory.
The prosecution argues that Amy's past trauma was not repeated in her life with Wade.
The fact that Amy is now accusing Wade of abuse, both physical, sexual abuse, it feels very convenient.
It seemed that she had a pattern of doing this. It seemed that this was just her way of getting what she wanted. We could see that she communicated with other men quite frequently in a sexual manner, so that could have been one of the motives that she had.
I also believe that she was already talking to other men and was trying to get out of the situation.
She didn't just shoot him. After she found out that she couldn't lift a dead body, that's when she went and got the stuff, the respirators, the gloves, and was going to put him in that trash can. She wanted to wipe him off the face of the earth.
It's the kind of case that causes you to lose sleep at night. In fact, one of the jurors at the trial had to be excused because he was so traumatized by the details of the case.
On April 21st, 2013, the jury renders their verdict.
She was asking for mercy, but the jury did not believe anything she had to say. And they sentenced her to the most that they could, which was life in prison.
I think justice was served. She can't hurt anybody else. She can't hurt the children anymore. She can't hurt anybody. All I have is a box with my son cremated and the memories in my head.
I would never thought something like this would happen to our family. She's a monster. The only I can ask her is why? Why can't you just walk away?
Opened the closet door. Inside, he discovered the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been hog-tied with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were heavily bound. The scene was devastatingly violent. Officer Weller, despite his 14 years of experience, was left in absolute shock. He walked out of the bedroom into the living room, unable to speak or even use his radio immediately. When he finally collected himself, he called for a supervisor and the crime scene unit. Detective Stewart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years on the force, soon arrived. He was stunned by the sheer brutality of the crime. The physical evidence suggested that the elderly couple had been attacked the moment they stepped through their front door. There was blood on the carpet, the couch, the table, and the walls. Furthermore, the perpetrators had left behind highly specific clues. A plate of crushed prescription pills sat on the coffee table, a marijuana cigarette lay nearby, and a light blue bandana was wrapped tightly around a beer bottle. To the initial investigators, this looked like the calling card of an active local Vietnamese gang, perhaps a robbery or extortion attempt gone horribly wrong. Yet, Detective Stewart remained deeply skeptical. The crime scene felt almost too perfect, as if someone had deliberately staged the gang-related items to mislead the police. In his experience, most gang robberies did not involve such extreme, personal violence against an elderly couple. It felt like an inside job disguised as a random act of street crime. Part 3. The Stagnant Years and a Sudden Spark. The autopsy report brought further heartache. The medical examiner revealed that while both victims had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, the actual cause of death was suffocation. Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape and Long's in 10 feet. The level of deliberate cruelty was staggering. Hoping for a breakthrough, investigators processed the crime scene for DNA and fingerprints. They questioned over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and family members. Chow Tran provided an airtight alibi. explaining that the entire family had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday at a party the night before, staying together until past 10 o'clock in the evening. Shortly after the murders, Detective Stewart received a routine call from an insurance company. It turned out that Long and Hong had a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the commercial sewing business could survive if either of the founders pass away. Without any matching DNA profiles in the national database, and with all family members cooperating, the investigation slowly ground to a halt. For 2 long years, the case remained cold. The community tried to heal, but the memory of the sweet, hard-working couple hung over Arlington like an unresolved shadow. Then, in October of 2015, a bizarre turn of events breathed new life into the investigation. A 16-year-old youth named Willie Guillory had been arrested in Houston for stealing a horse, a felony in the state of Texas, because he was a minor at the time of the 2012 murders. His DNA had never been entered into the federal database. But once he turned 18 and was convicted of felony, his genetic profile was uploaded into the system. The system flagged a perfect match. The DNA on the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, detectives brought Willie in for questioning, confronted with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment. The young man broke down in tears and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been brought along by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, who told him they were going to Arlington to perform a job. According to Willie, they used a key provided to them to enter the apartment and stage the burglary, scattering the pills, the blue bandana, and the beer bottle to make it look like gang activity. When the elderly couple returned home, Bobby attacked them with a blunt object, and together they bound them with duct tape and hid them in the closet. When asked why they would commit such a heinous act against strangers, Willie revealed a shocking truth. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a woman named Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. Part 4, The Mastermind and the Unraveling. On December 16, 2015, police arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the reality of his situation, Bobby also confessed. He claimed he had been laid off, desperate, and struggling to survive when Daphne Wright offered him $10,000 to carry out the hit. Bobby described Daphne as a spiritual loan shark. Over the years, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, had run up an astronomical debt to her for her spiritual services, which had ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family could not produce the cash. Knowing that the couple held massive life insurance policies, Daphne allegedly masterminded a plan to eliminate them so the family could collect the insurance money and pay off their spiritual debt. When Bobby was asked how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment, he dropped a bombshell. He claimed she had received it directly from Chow Tran. Detectives immediately shifted their focus to Daphne Wright. When they searched her Houston home, they uncovered detailed financial ledgers showing that she routinely charged desperate clients $10, $20, $30, or $40,000 for blessings and curse removals. She was a woman who commanded absolute authority over her household and her clients, maintaining a cold, unshakable demeanor even under arrest. To secure a conviction against Daphne, the true mastermind behind the conspiracy, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony. Chow took the stand during Daphne's trial, which began on August 26, 2019. He painted a picture of a desperate family trapped under the psychological control of a woman they believed held supernatural power over their lives and deaths. He claimed they were terrified of what Daphne would do to them if they failed to pay. He even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money and escape. Daphne's grip, a claim that investigators viewed with deep skepticism. The defense argued fiercely that Chow was an untrustworthy accomplice who had orchestrated the crime to pocket the $850,000 of insurance money for himself, pointing out the complete lack of physical documentation regarding the alleged $280,000 debt. In September of 2019, the jury delivered its verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to the ultimate punishment of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory likewise faced justice for their roles in the tragedy. Though the legal battle reached its conclusion, the emotional scars remained deep for Detective Stewart and the people of Arlington. The loss of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu served as a solemn reminder of the dangers of desperation and blind trust. Yet, through the painstaking work of the justice system, the truth was finally brought into the light, ensuring that the memory of a gentle, hard-working couple would not be forgotten, and that those who sought to exploit faith for greed would ultimately answer for their deeds. The early morning of June 10th, 2012, in Arlington, Texas, was quiet and heavy with the humid warmth of approaching summer. The streets were mostly empty, bathed in the soft, gray light of dawn. But at 7:29 in the morning, that silence was broken by a call to emergency dispatchers. On the other end of the line was 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant Chow Tran. His voice, trembling with anxiety he could barely contain, came through the receiver. He was asking for a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The dispatcher, trying to gather the necessary details, asked for the names of the people in question. Chow, struggling through his panic, spelled the names out. His father-in-law's first name was L-O-N-G, and the last name was spelled W-N-G-Y-N. Chow explained that his father-in-law was 70-something years old at the time. As the dispatcher worked, Chow's panic flared. He explained that his son and his wife had gone to the apartment to look. They said they saw everything falling down inside, as if a storm had swept through the small home. The dispatcher assured Chow that officers were being sent immediately. Chow had sent his teenage son to knock on the door earlier, but there had been no answer. As the minutes ticked by, more family members began to gather outside the residence. Their worry grew with every passing second. They noticed that a window of the apartment was open, which was highly unusual. Things simply did not look right. Terrified of what they might find if they stepped inside, they stood in a small, anxious huddle, waiting for the police to arrive. Officer Weller was the first to arrive at the scene. He had been dispatched quickly, but when he pulled up, he knew this was not a typical welfare check. Usually, such calls did not come in so early in the morning, and it was rare to see an entire family standing outside an apartment, their faces pale with fear. Officer Weller entered the apartment alone, his hand instinctively resting near his holster. As he crossed the threshold, he was met with the telltale signs of a burglary. The living room was in complete disarray. CDs were scattered across the floor, furniture was overturned, and belongings were strewn everywhere. He called out, his voice echoing in the quiet apartment, but there was no answer. He cleared the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Everything was empty. The only room left to check was the bedroom. He walked in, his eyes scanning the room. He did not notice anything out of the ordinary at first glance. He was not focused on the state of the room. His sole priority was finding the elderly couple and ensuring they were safe. Thinking they might have simply gone out for an early morning walk, he turned to leave. But as he swung his flashlight toward the door, the beam of light caught hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. Officer Weller hesitated. A deep, instinctual feeling told him not to open that door, but his duty pushed him forward. He reached out, grabbed a handle, and pulled the closet door open. Inside, he saw two people. It was a mother and the father he had been looking for. They were hog-tied with duct tape, Their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped in the gray adhesive. There was blood everywhere. In that split second, the officer knew they were dead. Even with 14 years of experience, it was the most gruesome, brutal scene he had ever witnessed. Shocked and unable to speak, Weller walked out of the bedroom and stood in the middle of the living room. He could not bring himself to use his radio immediately. When he finally found his voice, he requested a supervisor and a crime scene unit. Chapter 2, the investigation begins. When the Arlington homicide investigators arrived, the gravity of the crime cast a shadow over the entire team. Leading the team was a veteran detective who had spent 21 years in homicide. He had seen the worst of humanity, but this scene ranked among the absolute most horrific. It was clear that a violent struggle had taken place. There were bloodstains on the carpet, the couch, the table, and the walls. It appeared the couple had grabbed at the walls as they were being dragged toward the back bedroom, closet. Initial theories pointed toward a robbery gone wrong, given the ransacked state of the apartment. However, the sheer level of violence seemed far too extreme for a simple theft. The victims suffered blunt force trauma to their foreheads, with markings that suggested a tool like a hammer might have been used. The neighbors and community members were devastated. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee were known as a sweet, generous, and hard-working couple who never bothered anyone. They had no known enemies. The couple had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing their 3 children and their deeply held traditions to Texas. They settled in Arlington, a city in Tarrant County with a large and vibrant Vietnamese community, and built a commercial sewing business. To help run the business, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who spoke the best English and served as the face of the company. For nearly a decade, they thrived, even securing a lucrative contract to make garments for Disney. But by the year 2011, their luck had run out. They lost the Disney contract, and the business began a steep decline. Desperate to save their livelihood, the family turned to traditional beliefs. In Vietnamese culture, many believe in spiritual advisors who can help lift curses and bring good fortune during times of financial ruin or personal crisis. While searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, some 250 miles away. Her name was Daphne Wright, and she advertised that she could remove bad curses and bring prosperity. Chow contacted Daphne and drove to Houston for a consultation. She performed a ritual, and the family felt a sudden wave of hope. They believed their business would finally turn around. But a year later, the only thing that had visited the family was a terrible, unspeakable tragedy. Chapter 3: Clues and Red Herrings. As investigators meticulously processed the crime scene, they found several odd items in the living room. On the coffee table sat a plate of crushed prescription pills, alongside a marijuana cigarette. More striking, however, was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a beer bottle. To the detectives, this looked like a deliberate calling card. Arlington had active Vietnamese gangs known for extorting local businesses, and the color of the bandana matched their known identifiers. Yet, experienced detectives remained skeptical. The scene felt too perfect, almost staged. Most gang members did not commit such highly personalized, excessively violent murders without a clear demand beforehand. As the forensic teams collected hair fibers, DNA swabs, and fingerprinted the duct tape, investigators sat down with Chow Tran. Because he was a primary English speaker, he spoke for the family. Chow explained that the night before, the family had gathered to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The couple had a wonderful time and stayed until about 10:30 before receiving a ride home. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. When asked if the couple kept large amounts of cash at home, Chow admitted that while some traditional Vietnamese families did not trust American banks, his in-laws did not have much money. He explained that the sewing business had been struggling and that they believed it was cursed. On June 11th, 2012, the autopsies were performed. The results were chilling. While the victims had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, that was not the cause of death. Hong Lee's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, and Long Wen's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of duct tape. They had suffocated to death. The realization of their suffering hardened the detectives' resolve. This was not a robbery. The primary intent of the killers was to ensure the couple did not survive. Then, a phone call changed the direction of the case. Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company. Routinely, companies notify authorities when a substantial life insurance policy is active on homicide victims. In this case, the policy was worth $1 million. When the detective inquired about the beneficiaries, one name stood out clearly: Chow Tran. Chapter 4. The Trail Goes Cold. On June 13, 2012, detectives brought Chow in for further questioning regarding the business and the large insurance policy. Chow explained that because the commercial sewing business was in his in-laws' names, the family wanted to ensure they had the financial stability to carry on the business if either parent passed away. He was cooperative, calm, and provided a seamless timeline of his whereabouts. He explained that on the night of the murders, the family had gathered at his home, eaten dinner, and played cards until just after 10 o'clock. Every family member backed up this alibi. Investigators collected DNA and fingerprints from Chow and the other family members to compare against the evidence found in the apartment. While they successfully gathered a DNA profile from the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table, it did not match Chow, any family member, or any profile in the national database known as CODIS. Detectives theorized the DNA might belong to a juvenile, as minors who have not committed prior felonies are not entered into the system. Without a match, the investigation stalled. Detectives interviewed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors and business associates. But every lead led to a dead end. For over 2 years, the file sat on a desk, growing cold. Then, in the year 2015, the case suddenly roared back to life. Chapter 5, A Confession in the Night. In October 2015, the police department received a notification. A DNA match had finally been made on the marijuana cigarette from the 2012 crime. Scene: the profile belonged to a young man named Willie Guillory. He had recently been convicted of stealing a horse in Houston, which is a felony in the state of Texas. Because of this felony conviction, his DNA was entered into CODIS for the first time. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old. Detectives tracked Willie down and arrested him on a parole violation rather than a murder charge, keeping their cards close to their chest. During questioning, Willie initially denied ever being in Arlington, but when detectives explained the precision of DNA evidence and how they knew he had been inside the apartment, the young man broke down in tears. He confessed, admitting he was there, but asserted he did not act alone. Willie explained that in June of 2012, he was living with his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. His uncle told him they were going to drive to Arlington to do a job, and Willie felt he had no choice but to comply. On June 9, 2012, they made the 3-hour drive. Bobby had a key to the apartment, which they used to enter and stage the burglary. They threw items around, scattered the pills, and placed a blue bandana around the beer bottle to make it look like a gang-related crime. Willie had smoked a small portion of a marijuana cigarette, leaving the butt behind. When the elderly couple returned home, Willie ran to the door to prevent the woman from escaping or screaming. Bobby grabbed the man and began beating him with a blunt object to incapacitate him. Once the couple stopped fighting, Bobby and Willie used duct tape to secure them, carried them into the bedroom closet, and fled the scene. When asked why they did it, Willie revealed a shocking truth. It was a murder-for-hire plot. The person who had orchestrated the entire plan was a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright. Willie explained that Daphne claimed the couple owed her a massive amount of money, and she wanted them dead if they did not pay up. Daphne had provided Bobby with the key to the apartment. Chapter 6. The Puppet Master. With Willie's confession, the puzzle began to come together. The police immediately moved to secure an arrest warrant for Bobby Guillory. On December 16, 2015, detectives arrested Bobby at his home in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the reality of the charges and the search warrant for his DNA, Bobby also confessed. He wept, claiming he was desperate and starving at the time, having been laid off from his job. He had never been in trouble with the law before. He explained that Daphne Wright had promised him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby described Daphne as a spiritual loan shark. Chow Tran and Hong Lee had run up a massive debt with her, totaling between $250,000 and $280,000, in a desperate attempt to lift the curse on their business. When they could not pay, Daphne discovered that Chow and his wife were the beneficiaries of 2 large life insurance policies. She allegedly decided that the only way to collect her money was to have the couple killed so the family could collect the insurance payouts. But the most shocking detail came when detectives asked how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment. Bobby looked at the investigators and stated that Daphne had gotten the key directly from Chow Tran. The betrayal stunned the detectives, who had built a supportive relationship with Chow over the years. Chapter 7. Justice Served and Lessons Learned. On August 31st, 2016, detectives confronted Daphne right at her home in Houston. She was a dominant force in her household, married with 3 daughters, and operated a lucrative business charging tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual services. Ledgers found during a subsequent search of her home detailed transactions of $10, $20, $30, and $40,000 for blessings and curses. Daphne remained cold and tight-lipped, refusing to speak without her attorney. Meanwhile, financial investigations revealed that after the deaths of his in-laws, Chow Tran had purchased a brand-new home, and the sewing business had folded completely. Facing prosecution, Chow negotiated a deal with the state through his attorney. He claimed that he and his mother-in-law had been terrified of Daphne's spiritual powers, believing she could place a deadly curse on their family if they did not pay. Chow claimed his mother-in-law had offered to sacrifice herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt. According to Chow, Daphne insisted that both parents must die to cover the entire amount. While prosecutors found Chow's story absurd, they knew they needed his testimony to convict the mastermind. They offered Chow immunity in exchange for his full cooperation against Bobby, Willie, and Daphne. In August of 2019, Daphne Wright's trial began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a greedy, manipulative woman who controlled his mind and forced his hand. The defense argued that Chow was the true instigator, pointing out that the $850,000 in insurance money went directly into Chow's pocket, and that no written documentation of the $280,000 debt actually existed. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury delivered their verdict. In September of 2019, Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also held accountable for their roles in the conspiracy. Though the legal battle reached its conclusion, the weight of the case lingered with the investigators. The realization that Chow Tran remained free did not sit well with those who had worked so hard to uncover the truth. Yet, they found solace in the belief that justice, in one form or another, eventually finds its way to everyone, and that what is done in the dark will always, eventually, come to light. In the heart of Texas, where the horizon stretches wide under an endless blue sky, lies the vibrant city of Arlington. For many years, this bustling community has been a sanctuary of hope, a place where diverse cultures weave together to create a colorful tapestry of shared dreams. Among the thousands who made the city their home was an endearing elderly couple, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The story of Long and Hong began many decades ago across the ocean in Vietnam. They were individuals of profound grace, carrying with them the quiet strength of a generation that understood the true meaning of perseverance. When they immigrated to the United States in the year 2000, they brought nothing but their beloved family, their time-honored traditions, and an unshakable faith in the future. With their 3 children in tow, they decided to establish their roots in Arlington, a city known for its welcoming spirit and a rapidly growing Vietnamese community. The first wave of immigrants had arrived here after the fall of Saigon in 1975, adapting remarkably well to their new surroundings while carefully preserving their heritage. By the 80s and late 90s, Arlington had become a hub of cultural warmth, making it the perfect sanctuary for Long and Hong to build their legacy. To build a home in a new land is to plant seeds in unfamiliar soil, trusting that love and hard work will make them bloom. Together with their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who possessed a natural charm and spoke the best English in the family, they started a commercial sewing business. Chow became the friendly face of the enterprise, navigating contracts and building relationships with local vendors. For nearly a decade, their dedication paid off beautifully. They secured prestigious contracts with major commercial giants, including the world-famous Disney brand. It was a golden era of prosperity, filled with laughter, family gatherings, and the satisfying hum of sewing machines crafting beautiful garments day after day. Chapter 2. The Looming Shadows. However, life is a way of testing even the strongest fabrics. By the year 2011, the family streak of good fortune began to fade. The lucrative contract with Disney came to an end, and the sewing business faced a quiet, difficult downturn. In times of great uncertainty, people often look to their deepest roots for comfort and guidance. For generations, traditional Eastern philosophies have emphasized a delicate balance of luck, harmony, and spiritual protection. It was common practice to seek the counsel of a spiritual advisor when facing major life transitions, financial challenges, or personal hardships. Hoping to restore their business to its former glory, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong, began searching for a guide who could help lift the heavy cloud of misfortune. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located about 250 miles away in the city of Houston. The advertisement was bold and filled with promises of spiritual healing, claiming the ability to lift ancient curses and usher in waves of good fortune. Encouraged by Hong's deep-seated beliefs, Chow reached out to this advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright. Chapter 3. The Houston Connection. Daphne Wright was a prominent figure in her community, known for a sharp mind and commanding presence. She lived in a comfortable Houston home with her husband, Howard, and their 3 daughters. To the outside world, she was a beacon of support, helping families navigate their troubles through traditional rituals. Chow traveled to Houston for an initial consultation, filled with hope that Daphne could perform the necessary rituals to turn their business around. Daphne agreed to assist them, but her spiritual guidance came with an incredibly high price tag. Over the next year, instead of finding relief, the family found themselves caught in a complex web of rising debts. The rituals did not yield the immediate financial miracles they had hoped for, yet the belief in Daphne's powers kept them tied to her services. The debts began to accumulate rapidly, eventually ballooning to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Despite the lack of tangible results, the pressure to pay for these extensive spiritual services intensified. The family's anxiety grew, creating a quiet tension that overshadowed their daily lives. What began as a sincere quest for spiritual alignment had slowly transformed into a heavy financial burden, setting the stage for an unexpected turn of events. Chapter 4. A Gathering of Clouds. On the evening of June 9th, 2012, the family gathered to celebrate a beautiful milestone, Long's birthday. It was an evening filled with warmth, delicious food, and the joy of family unity. Long and Hong laughed and enjoyed the company of their children and grandchildren, staying at the celebration until approximately 10 o'clock in the evening. After receiving a warm ride home from a family member, the sweet elderly couple retired to their quiet apartment. It was the last time they were seen enjoying the peaceful embrace of their loving family. The following morning, June 10th, 2012, at exactly 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers receive a call from Chow Tran. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, expressing deep concern because they were not answering their door and things at the apartment did not look right. Emergency dispatch log. Time, 7:29 in the morning. Caller, Chow Tran. Request, welfare check on Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. Status, dispatch patrol units immediately. When the responding officers, including the experienced Officer Weller, arrived at the scene, they found the family gathered outside, visibly anxious. Upon entering the apartment, the officers noticed signs of a chaotic disturbance. Chapter 5, The Long Search for Truth. Officer Weller systematically searched the residence, checking the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Everything seemed quiet until he reached the bedroom. There, next to a small closet, he noticed subtle hand smudges on the wall. With a cautious hand, Officer Weller opened the closet door and discovered the elderly couple. They had been placed there by intruders who had gone to great lengths to restrain them. Tragically, the physical toll of the encounter had been too great, and both Long and Hong had passed away. Arlington homicide investigators, including seasoned detectives with over 21 years of experience, immediately initiated a comprehensive investigation. Initially, the scene presented clues that pointed toward a robbery or gang-related activity. A blue bandana was found wrapped around a beer bottle, a common symbol associated with local street gangs. Crushed prescription pills and a marijuana cigarette were left on the coffee table. The living room appeared to have been searched, with items scattered about. However, experienced detectives quickly realized that the scene felt too orderly, almost as if it had been deliberately staged to mislead the police. Sometimes, a scene that appears too perfect is the first clue that things are not as they seem. Chapter 6, Unraveling the Threads. For over 2 years, the investigation continued diligently, but no immediate leads materialized. Detectives interviewed between 50 and 60 people, including family members, neighbors, and associates, collecting DNA samples and fingerprints. None of the evidence matched the profiles in the national databases. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through an unexpected turn of events. A young man named Willie Guillory, who was 16 years old at the time of the incident in 2012, was arrested for a felony charge involving the theft of a horse. Because he had reached adulthood and was convicted of felony, his DNA profile was entered into the national database. Instantly, the database identified a perfect match between Willie's DNA and the evidence recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the apartment. DNA database match result. Source: crime scene exhibit marijuana cigarette. Match: Willie Guillory. Data match: October 2015. When brought in for questioning, Willie became emotional and confessed to his involvement. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been recruited by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. More importantly, Willie disclosed that they had been hired to carry out the act by none other than the spiritual advisor, Daphne Wright. Chapter 7, The Mastermind Unveiled. With this critical information, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest Bobby Guillory. Facing the weight of the evidence, Bobby confessed to his role in the plan. He explained that he had been facing extreme financial desperation after being laid off from his job and Daphne had offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby further revealed a startling detail. Daphne had acquired a key to the apartment, which she claimed came directly from Chow Tran. It became clear that the entire scheme was a tragic consequence of immense financial pressure and manipulation. A search of Daphne's Houston residence uncovered detailed business ledgers. These records revealed that she routinely charged clients large sums, sometimes ranging from $10,000 to $40,000, for her spiritual services. Chapter 1. A Sunday Morning in Arlington. The morning sun of June 10th, 2012, rose over the city of Arlington, Texas, with a gentle, golden warmth that promised a beautiful summer day. In the quiet suburban neighborhood, the leaves of the towering oak trees rustled softly in the morning breeze. It was the kind of morning where one would expect nothing but the comforting aroma of brewing coffee and the cheerful chatter of families preparing for a peaceful day of rest. Yet, beneath the serene facade, a quiet anxiety was brewing. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, a telephone rang in the emergency dispatch center. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose voice trembled with an undeniable, heavy concern. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The dispatcher, accustomed to the calm and methodical nature of Sunday morning shifts, listened carefully as Chow Tran tried to explain his worries. His English, though clear, carried the heavy weight of panic. He spelled out his father-in-law's name slowly, ensuring there was no misunderstanding. Lima, Oscar, November, Golf, and then the family name. The gentleman was 70-something years old, a beloved patriarch of a large, close-knit family. Chow Tran explained that his teenage son had been sent to the apartment to knock on the door. The young boy had knocked repeatedly, his small fist echoing against the wood. But there had been no answer. Outside the apartment complex, more family members began to gather. They stood in the driveway, their faces creased with worry, looking up at the quiet windows of the residence. It was then that they noticed something unusual. A window at the side of the residence was slightly open in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. An open window on a ground-floor apartment in the early hours of the morning was a subtle but deeply troubling sign. Chapter 2. The Arrival of the Law. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience serving the community, received the dispatch call. He navigated his patrol vehicle through the quiet streets of Arlington, expecting a routine check on an elderly couple who might have simply overslept or forgotten to silence their phones. When Officer Weller arrived at the scene, however, the atmosphere immediately struck him as unusual. A large group of people, an entire family, stood quietly outside the apartment building. Their quiet, collective anxiety was palpable. It was far too early in the morning for such a gathering, and welfare checks rarely began with an entire household waiting on the pavement in hushed anticipation. Something felt different about this call from the very moment I pulled up. Officer Weller would later recall to his colleagues. It was not just the hour, but the silence of the family. They were too terrified to go inside themselves. They were looking to us for answers, hoping against hope that everything was fine. Taking a deep breath, Officer Weller approached the front door. He knocked firmly, calling out his identity and purpose. Chapter 3. The Silent Rooms. Receiving no response, Officer Weller carefully entered the residence. The interior of the apartment immediately presented a scene of quiet disarray. It bore the unmistakable, chaotic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered across the floor, and the peaceful order of a beloved home had been completely shattered. The living room was silent, the television cold and dark. The kitchen, usually filled with a welcoming sense of traditional Vietnamese cooking, was empty. The bathroom door stood open, revealing no one inside. Officer Weller moved systematically through the apartment, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim morning light. He called out repeatedly, his voice echoing off the walls, but only silence answered him. The only room left to inspect was the master bedroom. He stepped into the bedroom, his eyes scanning the space. At first glance, the room appeared empty. The bed was made, and there was no immediate sign of life. Relieved, Officer Weller began to think that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning. Walk to enjoy the cool air before the Texas heat became too intense. He turned to leave the room, his mind already formulating a reassuring message for the anxious family waiting outside. But as he swung his flashlight toward the doorway, the beam of light caught something unexpected on the wall next to a very small closet. There were dark, distinct smudges near the doorframe, smudges that looked like handprints left in a moment of desperate struggle. Officer Weller hesitated. Every instinct gained over more than a decade of police work told him that opening that small closet door would change everything. Taking a slow, steadying breath, he reached out and turned the brass handle. Chapter 1: A Crimson Discovery. The interior of the small closet revealed a sight that would haunt the veteran officer for the rest of his career. Two people were huddled inside the confined space. It was the mother and the father, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. They had been bound tightly, their hands and feet secured with silver adhesive duct tape. Their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped in the same thick tape, completely silencing any cries for help. There was a devastating amount of blood covering the floor and the surrounding walls of the small space. In that split second, Officer Weller knew that any hope of a peaceful resolution was gone. The elderly couple was deceased. The sheer brutality of the scene was overwhelming, even for an officer who had spent 14 years responding to the city's most challenging emergencies. Stunned and feeling a deep sense of sorrow for the family waiting just outside, Officer Weller stepped back out of the bedroom. He stood in the middle of the quiet living room for a moment, gathering his composure, before picking up his radio to request the immediate assistance of a supervisor and the crime scene investigation unit. Chapter 2: The homicide investigators arrive. Within the hour, the quiet suburban street was filled with the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles. Detective Stewart, a seasoned homicide investigator with 21 years of experience examining the city's most complex cases, arrived to take charge of the investigation. Investigation profile: Arlington Police. Case date: June 10, 2012. Lead investigator: Detective Stewart, 21 years experience. Responding officer: Officer Weller, 14 years experience. Victims: Long Nguyen, 70-something, and Hong Lee, 60-something. Scene: suburban apartment, Arlington, Texas. As Detective Stewart walked through the apartment, he noted the extensive evidence of a violent struggle. It was clear that the attack had begun the very moment the couple crossed their threshold. There were signs of impact near the entrance. Traces of blood on the entryway carpet. Deep stains on the fabric of the living room sofa. Shattered items and blood on the coffee table. Handprints on the walls leading toward the back bedroom, suggesting the victims had tried to hold onto the walls as they were forced backward. The living room also showed signs of being ransacked. A collection of compact discs was scattered across the floor, and various cabinets had been flung open to a casual observer. It looked like a home invasion robbery that had escalated into unspeakable violence. Yet, to Detective Stewart's experienced eye, something about the scene felt slightly theatrical, as if someone had gone to great lengths to make it look like a random act of gang violence. Chapter 3: The Shadows of the Past. To understand why anyone would want to harm such a gentle, hard-working couple, the investigators had to look deep into the history of the family. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee had immigrated to the United States of America from Vietnam in the year 2000. Like thousands of others before them, they came in search of the American dream, seeking a stable, prosperous future for their 3 children and many grandchildren. The city of Arlington, located within Tarrant County, was home to a vibrant and thriving Vietnamese community. The first major wave of Vietnamese immigrants had arrived in the region after the historic events of 1975, bringing with them a rich cultural heritage, a strong work ethic, and a deep commitment to family values. Long and Hong were industrious individuals. Upon settling in Texas, they established a commercial sewing business. It was a true family enterprise because their son-in-law, Chow Tran, spoke the most fluent English. He became the public face of the business, handling negotiations with contractors and managing the daily business operations. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off handsomely. The business secured lucrative contracts with major commercial giants, including producing garments for prominent entertainment companies like the Disney Enterprise. The family enjoyed a reputation as respected, prosperous members of the local community. Chapter 4. The Turn of Fortune. By the year 2011, however, the family's spectacular run of good luck began to falter. The competitive landscape of commercial manufacturing shifted, and they unfortunately lost their major contract with the Disney Enterprise. Without this primary source of revenue, the sewing business began a steady, worrying decline. In many traditional East Asian cultures, a sudden run of bad luck is not viewed merely as a financial setback, but as a spiritual imbalance. For thousands of years, people have believed in the protective power of spiritual advisors, ancestral blessings, and the alignment of one's household energy to attract prosperity and ward off misfortune. Desperate to save their life's work and protect their family's future, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Li, began searching for a spiritual solution. In the pages of a local Vietnamese-language newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor operating out of Houston, Texas, approximately 250 miles away. The advertisement claimed that this advisor possessed a rare ability to perform sacred rituals that could lift ancient curses, remove negative energy, and restore abundant good fortune to struggling businesses. Believing this was the answer to their prayers, Hong Li encouraged Chow Tran to make contact. Chapter 5. The Spiritual Advisor. Chow Tran traveled to Houston to meet with the spiritual advisor, a charismatic woman named Daphne Wright. Daphne operated her practice from a comfortable suburban home, where she presented herself as a powerful medium capable of manipulating unseen forces for the benefit of her clients. Daphne agreed to take on the family's case. She performed elaborate rituals involving incense, prayers, and symbolic offerings, promising that the dark cloud hovering over the sewing business would soon dissipate. The family returned to Arlington filled with renewed hope, believing that their financial troubles would soon be a thing of the past. But as the months passed, the business did not recover. Instead, the family found themselves sinking deeper into a financial quagmire. Rather than questioning Daphne's abilities, their belief only intensified. They became convinced that the curse on their business was far more powerful than they had initially realized, requiring even more frequent and expensive spiritual interventions. To fund these continuous rituals, the family began to run up a massive debt with Daphne Wright. Because they could not pay her exorbitant fees up front, Daphne allowed them to receive her services on credit. Over the course of a single year, the spiritual debt ballooned to an astronomical sum, estimated to be between $250,000 and $280,000. Chapter 6. The False Clues. Back at the crime scene in June 2012, investigators continued to search for physical evidence. Amidst the chaos of the ransacked apartment, they discovered several items that seemed designed to point the finger of suspicion toward local youth gangs. A plate containing crushed prescription pills was left on the coffee table, arranged as if someone had intended to inhale them. A partially consumed marijuana cigarette lay in an ashtray nearby. Most notably, a light blue bandana was wrapped carefully around a glass beer bottle, left in plain view on the kitchen counter. Detective Stewart consulted with the department's gang intelligence unit. While certain local Vietnamese gangs were known to use specific colors and operate extortion rings, the presentation of the evidence felt remarkably tidy. It was almost as if the perpetrators had left a calling card specifically to ensure the police would attribute the crime to local street gang activity. In our line of work, we often say that when a scene looks too perfect, it usually is. Detective Stewart noted during a briefing, a gang member committing a violent home invasion does not typically take the time to wrap their colors neatly around a bottle and leave it behind like a signature. We had to consider the very real possibility that this entire scene was staged to mislead us. The investigators carefully collected the physical evidence, including the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers, and swabs of blood, sending them to laboratory for advanced deoxyribonucleic acid testing. Chapter 7. The Alibi and the Search. As the laboratory technicians worked to extract potential genetic profiles from the evidence, detectives focused on interviewing the family members. Chow Tran, serving as the primary spokesperson due to his English fluency, provided a detailed timeline of the evening preceding the discovery. On the night of June 9th, the family had gathered to celebrate Long Nguyen's birthday. It was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter, traditional food, and card games. The elderly couple had stayed at the party until approximately 10 o'clock in the evening, after which they were driven home by another relative. Chow Tran maintained that his relationship with his in-laws was filled with love and mutual respect. When questioned about any potential enemies or business rivals who might wish harm upon the couple, Chow could offer no names. He painted a picture of a sweet, generous, and deeply religious couple who never bothered anyone and were loved by all who knew them. When the preliminary deoxyribonucleic acid results returned from the laboratory, they presented a frustrating dead end. The genetic profile recovered from the marijuana cigarette did not match Chow Tran, any other family members, or any known offenders registered in the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Combined DNA Index system. For more than 3 years, the investigation remained stalled. The files were carefully organized and placed in the department's cold case division, where they waited for a new spark of information to bring them back to life. Chapter 8. The Missing Link. That spark finally arrived in October the year 2015. The department received an automated notification from a national database. A genetic profile that had recently been entered into the system matched the deoxyribonucleic acid recovered from a marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene over 3 years prior. The match belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston, Texas, because horse theft is classified as a felony under Texas state law. Willie was required to submit a biological sample to the state database upon his conviction. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie Guillory had been only 16 years old. Because he was a minor with no prior felony record, his genetic profile had never been entered into the Combined DNA Index system, which explained why the initial search had yielded no results. Detectives immediately traveled to Houston to locate Willie Guillory, rather than arresting him for capital murder right away. They detained him on an outstanding warrant for violating the terms of his juvenile parole. Chapter 9. The Confession. In the interrogation room of the Arlington Police Department, Willie Guillory initially denied any knowledge of the city of Arlington or the elderly couple. However, when Detective Stewart explained the infallible nature of genetic science and showed him the matching data, the young man's composure crumbled. He began to weep, realizing that his past had finally caught up with him. Willie confessed to his involvement, but he quickly insisted that he was not the mastermind behind the terrible deed. He explained that in the summer of 2012, he had been an impressionable 16-year-old living under the influence of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his Uncle Bobby had approached him on June 9th, 2012, and told him they were going to take a drive to Arlington to perform a job. Willie, feeling he had no choice but to obey his elder relative, agreed to accompany him. When they arrived at the apartment complex, Bobby produced a key to the residence, allowing them to enter without forcing their way inside. Bobby then instructed Willie to help him stage the scene to make it look like a random burglary committed by gang members. They scattered items, placed a blue bandana around the beer bottle, and left the crushed pills and the marijuana cigarette, which Willie had briefly smoked, inadvertently leaving behind his own genetic signature. Chapter 10, The Trial of Truth. With Willie's detailed confession in hand, detectives quickly moved to arrest his uncle, Bobby Guillory, at his residence in Katy, Texas. Faced with the reality of his nephew's confession and the prospect of capital murder charges, Bobby also chose to cooperate with the authorities. Bobby revealed that he had been approached by a woman named Daphne Wright, the very same spiritual advisor who had been consulting with the Nguyen family. Bobby, who was unemployed and facing severe financial distress at the time, was offered $10,000 by Daphne to carry out the deed. Daphne Wright, it appeared, was far more than a simple spiritual medium. She operated like a spiritual loan shark. When the family's debt to her reached nearly $280,000, she realized they would never be able to pay her back through the dwindling profits of their sewing business. However, Daphne had learned that Chow Tran and his wife were the primary beneficiaries of two substantial life insurance policies on the elderly couple, totaling at least $1 million. Recognizing an opportunity to collect her outstanding debt, Daphne devised a plan to eliminate the elderly couple so that the family could collect the insurance, pay out, and settle their accounts with her. During her subsequent trial in August of the year 2019, the prosecution presented a compelling case detailing the dark intersection of greed, superstition, and betrayal. Chow Tran, having been granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full cooperation, testified extensively about how Daphne had exerted a powerful psychological hold over his family, leading them to believe that her spiritual wrath would be far worse than any earthly consequence. The jury deliberated carefully before returning a verdict of guilty on 2 counts of capital murder against Daphne Wright. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would spend the remainder of her days reflecting on the devastating consequences of her greed. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced a hand of justice for their respective roles in the tragedy. Though the legal proceedings had concluded, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee remained bright in the hearts of those who loved them. Their story stood as a solemn, powerful reminder of the enduring importance of family, the search for truth, and the ultimate triumph of justice over the darkest of shadows. The morning sun over Tarrant County did not rise with a sudden burst, but rather unveiled itself slowly, casting a warm, golden hue across the sprawling suburban landscape of Arlington, Texas. For decades, this city had served as a grand melting pot, a place where the old world and the new world met in quiet harmony. Following the historic events of 1975 and the fall of Saigon, waves of Vietnamese immigrants had traveled thousands of miles across the ocean, carrying with them nothing but their dreams, their sacred traditions, and an unyielding work ethic. They had looked at the wide Texas skies and decided that this was a place where their children could grow, where their heritage could be preserved, and where honest labor could build a lasting legacy. Among those who had arrived with hope in their hearts were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife. Only when they immigrated to the United States of America in the year 2000, they brought with them a deep, quiet dignity. They were a sweet, generous couple who never bothered anyone. To know them was to respect them. They spoke softly, worked tirelessly, and maintained a profound connection to the time-honored spiritual traditions of their homeland. To the tightly knit Vietnamese community of Arlington, Long and Hong were symbols of resilience and grace. Hoping to establish a legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. Long and Hong started a commercial sewing business shortly after settling in Texas. It was a true family endeavor because their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man with a sharp mind for logistics, spoke the best English. He naturally became the face of the business. Chow handled the contractors, negotiated the terms, and interacted with the corporate giants who sought their craftsmanship. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore magnificent fruit. The sewing machines hummed a constant, reassuring song of prosperity, culminating in lucrative contracts with massive commercial enterprises, including the world-famous Disney Corporation. But as the year 2011 approached, the unpredictable tides of commerce began to shift. The contract with Disney was lost, and the steady stream of income slowed to a worrying trickle. The hum of the sewing machines grew quiet, and a heavy shroud of financial anxiety descended upon the family home. In times of great hardship, human beings often look upward and inward, seeking answers from forces greater than themselves. For generations, the families of their homeland have believed in the ancient spirits of fortune and protection. They believed that when a household fell into a shadow of bad luck, it was not merely a matter of bad economics, but a spiritual misalignment. They believe in the presence of lucky deities and money protection gods. And they believe that certain unique individuals possess the spiritual sensitivity to lift curses and restore harmony. It was during a particularly dark afternoon that Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, sat together, flipping through the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper. Amid the advertisements for grocery stores, doctors, and community events, their eyes fell upon a small, intriguing listing. It was an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, some 250 miles away. The advertisement promised a rare and powerful gift, the ability to lift terrible curses, bestow divine protection, and usher in an era of boundless good fortune. Filled with hope and encouraged by Hong, Chow Tran reached out to the spiritual savior. Her name was Daphne Wright. She was a loud, direct, and commanding 44-year-old woman who ran her household in Houston with an iron fist. Her husband, Howard, and her 3 daughters lived quietly in her shadow, as everything in their world centered around her. To those who sought her services, Daphne appeared to be a beacon of spiritual authority. Chow made the long journey to Houston to meet Daphne for an initial consultation. Within the quiet rooms of her home, she performed a ritual designed to sweep away the dark clouds hovering over the family's sewing business. Chow returned to Arlington with a renewed sense of optimism. He truly believed that their luck was about to change, and that the ancient blessings of protection would soon wash over their lives. Yet, 1 year later, instead of prosperity, an unspeakable tragedy would unfold, leaving an entire community shattered and a seasoned police force frozen in disbelief. The welfare check. The morning of June 10, 2012, began with an urgent, trembling phone call to the emergency dispatchers of the Arlington Police Department. The time was exactly 7:29 in the morning. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and confusion as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. Chow explained to the dispatcher that his son and wife had gone to check on the elderly couple, only to find the residents in complete silence. They had knocked on the door, but there was no response. As the family gathered outside the apartment complex, their anxiety turned to sheer terror. They noticed that one of the windows to the apartment was wide open, and the interior appeared to be in disarray. Too terrified to step inside and face whatever lay beyond the threshold, they waited anxiously on the pavement for the authorities to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of law enforcement experience, was quickly dispatched to the scene. As he pulled up to the apartment building, he immediately sensed that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was rare to receive such requests so early in the morning, and the sight of an entire family standing outside frozen in silent dread, sent a chill down his spine. Upon entering the apartment, Officer Weller was greeted by the classic, telltale signs of a residential burglary. The living room was in complete disarray. Compact discs were scattered across the floor, drawers were pulled open, and furniture was pushed aside. Calling out into the quiet air, Officer Weller received no answer. He cleared the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Each space was empty, yet the silence in the home felt incredibly heavy, almost suffocating. The only room left to check was the master bedroom. Stepping into the bedroom, Officer Weller scanned the space with his flashlight. At first glance, he did not notice anything unusual that stood out. His sole focus was on finding the elderly couple, hoping against hope that they had simply gone out for an early morning walk and that the disarray inn. The living room was a separate, isolated incident. Feeling a brief sense of relief, he turned to leave the room. But as the beam of his flashlight swept across the wall, he stopped. Next to a very small closet door, he saw faint, dark hand smudges on the plaster. A sudden, overwhelming instinct washed over him. Every fiber of his being screamed at him not to touch that handle, whispering that what lay behind the door would change him forever. But duty prevailed. Officer Weller took a deep breath, reached out, and slowly opened the closet door. Inside the cramped, dark space lay Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been hog-tied with heavy duct tape. Their heads and mouths were wrapped completely in layers of the thick, gray adhesive. There was blood everywhere, splattered against the walls and pooling on the floor. In that split second, Officer Weller knew they were gone. Despite his 14 years of serving the public, this was the most gruesome and brutal scene he had ever witnessed. Stunned into absolute silence, Officer Weller walked out of the bedroom and into the center of the living room. He stood there, unable to speak, unable to process the sheer horror of the scene. It took several long moments before he could find his voice, reach for his radio, and request a supervisor and a crime scene investigation unit. The illusion of chaos. When the seasoned homicide investigators of the Arlington Police Department arrived, led by detectives with decades of experience, they too were deeply shaken. Detective Stewart, a veteran who had spent 21 years investigating homicides, stood in the apartment and felt a profound sadness. This was one of the worst crime scenes he had ever encountered in his long and distinguished career. An initial examination of the apartment revealed a scene of intense violence. There was evidence that a struggle had begun the very moment the elderly couple stepped through their front door. Blood splatters were found on the carpet, the couch, the dining table, and the walls. The victims had clearly tried to cling to the walls as they were forcibly dragged toward the back. Bedroom. On the coffee table in the living room, investigators found highly unusual items. There was a plate containing crushed prescription pills, neatly lined up as if prepared to be snorted, and a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. But what caught the detective's attention most of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle, left in plain view. Arlington had experienced its share of gang activity, and local Vietnamese gangs were known to extort businesses and leave their marks. A light blue bandana was a recognized color associated with local street gangs. To a casual observer, the message was clear. This was a robbery gone wrong. A brutal warning left by gang members who wanted everyone to know who was responsible. However, Detective Stewart and his team were not casual observers. They knew that sometimes a scene can appear too perfect. Most gang members who engage in robbery did not commit crimes of this extreme, personal nature. The level of violence used against two sweet, elderly citizens who had no enemies and were loved by everyone in the community did not align with a simple burglary. Furthermore, the sheer volume of duct tape used was shocking. Hong Lee's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, while Long Nguyen's face had been wrapped in 10 feet. They had not died from the blunt force trauma to their heads, but from suffocation. It was a slow, incredibly painful, and deliberate way to end a life. The detectives began to theorize that the entire scene had been staged. The scattered compact discs, the crushed pills, the marijuana cigarette, and the blue bandana on the beer bottle felt like a carefully constructed theater production, designed to lead the police down a false path. This was not a random robbery. It was deeply personal, and the ultimate goal from the very beginning was a complete elimination of Long and Hong. Secrets in the shadows. To uncover the truth, investigators began interviewing the family. Because Chow Tran was the only family member who spoke fluent English, he became the primary spokesperson during those difficult early days. Chow sat down with Detective Stewart and explained that on the night of June 9th, the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday. According to Chow, his in-laws had a wonderful time, laughing and enjoying the company of their grandchildren until about 10:30 in the evening. They were given a ride home by another family member, which was the last time they were seen alive. When asked if the couple kept large sums of cash in the home, a common practice among traditional immigrants who did not fully trust modern banking systems, Chow claimed that while they did keep some money, it was a very small amount. He reiterated that the sewing business had been struggling and that the family believed the spiritual curse had ruined their livelihoods. He painted a picture of a loving, hard-working couple who had simply fallen on hard times. As the days passed, investigators processed the physical evidence. They collected hair fibers, DNA swabs, and fingerprinted the apartment. They gathered a distinct DNA profile from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table. They compared this profile against the national database, known as the Combined DNA Index System, hoping for an immediate match. Unfortunately, the search returned no results. The DNA did not match any known offenders in the database, nor did it match Chow Tran or any other family member who had voluntarily provided samples. The investigation was dealt another blow when a routine inquiry with the insurance companies revealed a startling detail. Long and Hong carried substantial life insurance policies worth at least $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran himself. When confronted with this information, Chow cooperated fully. He explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the policies were put in place to ensure that the family could carry on the business if either of them were to pass away. He provided a solid, verified alibi for the night of the murders, explaining that he and the rest of the family had been playing cards together until late into the night. With no physical match, no prior criminal records pointing to the family, and no new leads, the momentum of the investigation began to slow. The files were organized, the evidence bags were stored, and for 2 long years, the case of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu went completely cold. The key and the confession. The breakthrough came in October the year 2015, from a most unexpected of places. In Houston, Texas, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony offense, stealing a horse. In the state of Texas, livestock theft is taken very seriously, and the conviction resulted in Willie's DNA profile being entered into the state database for the first time. Willie had been only 16 years old in the year 2012, which meant he had no adult record and no profile in the system when the murders occurred. When his DNA was uploaded, the system immediately flagged a perfect match. The DNA on the staged marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table in Arlington belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, investigators brought Willie in for questioning. When the detectives explained the nature of the DNA match and showed him the evidence placing him inside the bloodstained apartment, the young man broke down. He wept and confessed his role in the crime, but he quickly insisted that he had not acted alone. He had been led there by his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory. Willie explained that in June of 2012, his uncle Bobby had told him they were going to make a 3-hour drive to Arlington to perform a job. Willie, feeling he had no other choice, accompanied him. According to Willie, his uncle possessed a key to the apartment. which allowed them to enter without forcing their way in. Their instructions were highly specific. They were to ransack the living room, scatter compact discs, leave behind a blue bandana, crush pills, and a marijuana cigarette to make it look like local gang members had committed the crime. When the elderly couple finally arrived home, the plan turned violent. Bobby attacked Long, incapacitating him with a heavy, blunt object, while Willie tried to prevent Hong from escaping or making noise. Once the couple was subdued, they hogtied them, dragged them into the small bedroom closet, wrapped their faces in feet of heavy duct tape, and left them to suffocate in the dark. When detectives asked why they had targeted this sweet, innocent couple, Willie revealed a name that sent shockwaves through the department: Daphne Wright. Willie explained that his Uncle Bobby had met Daphne, the Houston-based spiritual advisor, through a friend. Daphne had complained that some clients owed her an enormous amount of money, and she wanted them to pay. She had told Bobby that if they did not pay up, she wanted them dead. Daphne had provided Bobby with a key to the apartment and promised him a payment of $10,000 to carry out the hit. The web of betrayal. Armed with this explosive confession, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, on December 16th, 2015, to arrest Bobby Guillory on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially, Bobby refused to speak, but when presented with a search warrant for his own DNA and the reality of his nephew's confession, Bobby's resolve crumbled. He confessed to his involvement, weeping as he expressed his fear and desperation. He explained that in 2011, he had been laid off from his job, was struggling to survive, and was terrified of ending up on the streets. Daphne Wright had recognized his desperation and exploited it. Bobby confirmed that Daphne was a mastermind behind the entire plot. He explained that Chow Tran and Hong Lu had run up an astronomical debt with Daphne for her. Spiritual services, a bill that had ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000. Because the sewing business had failed, they had no way to pay her back. Daphne, refusing to forgive the debt, had learned of the substantial life insurance policies held by the elderly couple. She realized that the only way to recover her money was for Long and Hong to die, allowing Chow and his wife to collect the insurance payout and settle their accounts with her. But the most shocking revelation came when detectives asked Bobby how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment. Bobby looked at the investigators and uttered a single name: Chow Tran.